Welcome, everybody. My name is Rachel Krug. I am the CEO of Virtual Field. I am joined today by Torri Thompson, who is our customer success lead and a former ophthalmic technician. We're going to be talking about boosting technician engagement and retention. This is a topic that our customers often like to talk to us about, so we know it is top of mind for you. And with that, we're gonna jump right in. Thank you so much for being here. So to start, let's just define what is technician retention. So it's employee retention, and that refers to a practice's ability to keep its technicians and prevent them from leaving. To do that, it's essential to identify the reasons why technicians choose to stay and why they might choose to leave. And why is this an issue? Well, there's a competitive job market out there. There's numerous opportunities in other industries, and technicians often experience burnout and stress, and that can lead to dissatisfaction and turnover. And on that point, Duke University recently found that 49% of technicians reported burnout in a 2017 survey, higher than other medical professionals, including providers. So that just gives us some context as to, again, why this is an issue. So what can we do about this issue, and what can we do to retain technicians? The first tip that we have is to involve technicians in decision-making. So engaging technicians in decision-making empowers them and enhances their sense of value. For example, involving technicians in evaluating and providing feedback on new equipment like visual field analyzers. And again, Torri's going to share some experiences of times when she's been involved in decisions and times when she hasn't, and how that's made a difference. Torri.
Good morning, everyone. So the first example I have of not being involved in a decision in the practice I was at, I was an ophthalmic technician for 7 years for retina specialists, and we did a lot of B scans, and the doctor invested in this very technical, very expensive piece of equipment that we really didn't need at the time. He kind of just went out and purchased it on his own, and it had a piece that was gold coated, and it was like $10,000. So we were, as the techs, we were kind of scared to even interact with this piece of equipment. So it kind of collected dust in a closet for a couple of months. And, the doctor was a little bit upset about it, that we weren't using it, but it was a piece of equipment that we needed at the time. And I feel like if we were involved in the decision-making process, we could have kind of, avoided any of that frustration that he was feeling, since, that expensive piece of equipment was sitting in a closet for a little while. Whereas when we were switching from one EMR to another EMR, we went from eClinical to Next Tech. So it was cloud-based, it was new, it was really exciting. I had a big piece in figuring out how to implement it in our practice, what would be the best way to go from the first EMR to the second. And what it did was it allowed me to learn about the EMR and then in turn train my other coworkers, and it just made it a more cohesive process. And it just really showed how important it was for someone from the staff to have a say in, something new coming to the office.
Awesome. Appreciate that very much. Thank you for telling us that. Our next tip is to invest in professional development. So this is essential for providing growth, and when employees feel like they're growing, they tend to stay and retain at the practice. This could really take a lot of different forms, anything from participation in industry events to conferences and workshops to an online class, just to expand knowledge and network with experts. Torri, can you share a little bit about your experience as a technician and professional development?
Yes, so this is something that actually went into my decision in leaving clinical healthcare. I felt a little stuck and a little stagnant in my role. There wasn't really any place for me to move up, and I didn't really feel invested in the practice by the doctor. There were a couple instances where I was able to accompany him to like diabetic walks and small events like that where I did get to talk to other doctors and other, technicians that worked in the area. And I wish I would have gotten more experience doing that. I probably would have reconsidered my employment, but I think that's super important to invest in your staff. Doesn't have to be sending them to a super, expensive class or a conference or anything like that. Just, if there's a local event going on that, you can have the opportunity to send your staff to, I think that's really important.
Yeah, Tori, I think you had shared a little bit with me ahead of this too on certification. Can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Yes. So half of the technicians at the practice I was at were certified, and half of them weren't. I was not a certified technician. I kind of learned on the job. And that's something that I really wish the doctor would have pushed for us to do, was to get certified, and, maybe not sponsoring it, but a little something towards it. I think that would have made a world of a difference. I really would have felt invested in and appreciated, because since you don't technically need to be certified to work in some offices, I didn't have that push to get certified. Whereas if the doctor would have kind of invested in us, I definitely would have made that jump.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. Our next tip is to cater to each team member's strengths. So everybody has strengths and weaknesses, but understanding the strengths of various team members, maybe one technician is great at anticipating the doctor's needs, another might be great at patient education, another might be great at building relationships with patients, just being able to emphasize those strengths and integrate them so that people can play to their strengths. And when you feel like you're doing a good job, you definitely, and you feel like you're part of a team, you definitely want to stay and retain and build on that momentum. Tori, can you speak to your experience here, please?
Yeah, so in the practice I was at, everything was kind of a step. So the first step was to come in and get their vision checked and check their medical history. Then it was testing, whether that was an OCT or fluorescein or visual field testing. And then they finally saw the doctor. Um, my coworkers, we were really close, and we were able to kind of identify our own strengths. The doctor kind of let us have um, kind of some leeway there and kind of putting ourselves where we needed to be in the office. And it was really great. It just made a better experience for the patients. I what was most likely going to be a scribe. I could pretty much do every job in the office, but I was a scribe because I also was the surgical coordinator. And what it allowed me to do was just build that relationship with the patient and really understand their needs for surgery. And then patients just coming back and seeing familiar faces, it just makes it a better experience for them, and it keeps the patients coming back, and it keeps the staff happy. When the staff is happy, the office runs much smoother.
Wow, that was really kind of compelling. So by playing to your strengths, you were able to keep patients happier, which it's like a big cycle, in turn keeps the technicians happier. That was great.
Yeah, doctor's appointments can sometimes feel like an assembly line where you're just going from room to room to room. But when you place your staff members in the position they're supposed to be in and they do it the best, it doesn't even feel like you're at a doctor's office. It really just feels like you're there to just check on your health.
Awesome. Thanks, Tori. Uh, the next tip we have is to ask for employee feedback. So like our other tips, you can do this in different ways. You might seek feedback in a one-on-one. You might be able to run a focus group if you're at a larger practice. Maybe you pull 5 technicians in for a focus group over lunch and ask for their feedback. So many different ways you can do this. Maybe it's an anonymous survey, but the feedback then gives you things to focus on, things that could improve, and data to inform decisions on how to evolve your practice to help retain staff. Tori, I know you had some experience with this when you were a technician. Would you mind sharing that with the audience, please?
Yeah, we didn't have a quote unquote formal way of giving feedback to the CEO of the practice. We really trusted our office manager. So we would kind of give her things that we were kind of complaining about, or things we wanted to see a change in, and she would relay it to the doctor, kind of anonymously. But once a month, we would have an office meeting where we could address specific things that were going on. And I think that was really important and should be implemented to offices. It's free. It's just 10 minutes before the day starts, maybe at the end of the month. Hey, did anyone have any issues with any of the patients? Any billing issues going on? How is everyone feeling about working? How are your schedules? Any adjustments need to be made? Just checking in with your employees and allowing them the opportunity to, speak their piece and kind of get things off their chest, or even just make suggestions, since they are speaking with the patients and they spend time with the patients, that's really important. It's really essential that you just understand where they're at and what they're seeing.
Great, thank you. Next tip is to offer resilience or wellness programs. So, for example, in the Duke University study we mentioned, where they found that 49% of technicians were burnt out, what they did was develop a resilience program that included emails, presentations, and a discussion series. And this led to enhanced collegiality, life skills, and self-management among participants. And I think there's a lot of different ways to do this. If we could go to the next slide, please, as well, on encouraging work-life balance. If it's not a formal program where, you have emails, etc., informally, just promoting healthy work-life balance, leading by example, fostering a supportive culture, setting realistic expectations, encouraging breaks, providing flexible time off, and providing self-care resources. They're just some ideas of how you can do it. So whether it's a formal program or just encouragement for self-care, either goes a really long way in protecting staff and retaining them. Torri, would love to hear how you experienced this at the practice you worked at.
Yeah, so it was kind of a smaller practice. I'm originally from Long Island. It was 3 doctors and then about 6 techs, I would say, rotating. We didn't have any type of formal program. It's a smaller office, but the office manager was really good about checking our PTO and making sure we were actually taking time off. So halfway through the year, she would call each of us in individually into her office. She would go over our time that we had taken, time that we still had to take. She didn't ever want us to roll time over to the next year. We absolutely could, but she just wanted to make sure we were getting out of the office. She would look at the schedule, look at the doctor's schedule, see when they were taking off, and then suggest, this would be a good time for you to take off. Just go spend time with your family. And the doctors were also really good at making sure that during our breaks, we actually left the office, whether that was to take a walk, go sit in our car. Sometimes the doctor would even give us like a gift card to go to Dunkin' Donuts to get stuff for the practice. And just making sure that we understood that we had a job to do, but we also still have a life to live.
Awesome. I love that. So in conclusion, prioritizing employee retention fosters trust, loyalty, and commitment among technicians, benefiting both patients and the practice as a whole. And we've given you a few different ways that you can think about that and some tips and tricks, as well as some personal experiences. At this point, we would love to take any questions. You can share them in the Q&A box below. We have a question on what are the key factors that technicians typically consider when deciding whether to stay with a medical practice, and how can we enhance those factors to improve retention? Torri, why don't you take a stab at that first? So what factors, you were a technician for 7 years, what kept you there for those 7 years?
First was I loved my coworkers. So one, hiring people that are really invested in healthcare. Number one, that always helps, working with people who actually care for the patients. And I felt like I was making a difference being there. I'm from Long Island, and there's a heavy like German Jewish population, so a lot of macular degeneration we were treating, and just the patient volume we had, I just really felt like I was contributing to healthcare by assisting the doctors doing all the treatments. But what I will say is really important was making sure I was at a practice that I felt was doing the right thing. We see a lot of fraud going on in the news and things like that. So working with doctors that were making the right decisions and had the best interest of the patients, and also using technology that was up to date was really important. Some of the instruments that we had were a little bit older. And as I was there a little bit longer, I started to, speak up about things that we wanted to replace when it's safe for the patients, just to have better equipment. And it makes our lives easier as the tech. It makes our experience much better. And then in turn, we can give the patients a better experience. So overall, just the environment of the office is just really, really important.
Thanks, appreciate that. Next question we have is, if we decided to start tomorrow, what would be the number one thing we could do to improve the technician's workday?
That's a really good question. Starting tomorrow. Just getting their feedback, making sure you're open to your technicians, asking them, is anything bothering them, anything that they want changed, anything that they know of in like techs talk to each other from different offices. So anything that you've heard coming down the grapevine that you'd like to implement here, I would definitely say you can immediately implement. Just being open to feedback from your staff, that makes a big difference.
Questions are coming in now. How can we effectively involve technicians in decision-making within the practice?
It's a really good question as well. Just have them involved. They don't need to be involved in the actual sales process, but when there's a demo going on, or if there is an opportunity for your staff to sit in on a demo for any type of new technology or EMR, whatever it is, definitely have them on the call. It makes them feel involved from the beginning, and they're going to be more likely to kind of push for this new whatever it is to actually be implemented and used. I think a lot of the times doctors, sometimes they purchase things and it collects dust just because the techs weren't involved. They don't really know what it is. They're not understanding what the effects are going to be if you use it. Sometimes it's something that's highly efficient and it doesn't get used because the technicians, they don't have a bond with it, or they haven't had an experience with it. So just having them involved from the beginning is really, really important.
And a little bit more on that, Torri. We didn't touch on this in the main part of the webinar, but now that we're in the Q&A, wondering if you could also answer that with differences you see, because you work with technicians every day in our onboarding calls. Can you tell the difference of when a tech has been involved in the decision-making process and when they haven't?
Yeah, it's really apparent when the technician knew that they were getting a virtual field. One, they expressed their excitement to start using it on the call. So I was waiting for this to come in. Like, they usually already have it set up and like connected to Wi-Fi. They've already engaged with it to get the beginning stages going. So our call is much more effective, just because I'm not, setting it up from scratch with them. They already used it. They already have questions. They already anticipated using this. Whereas the staff that kind of the doctor maybe saw it at a trade show or saw it at like Vision Expo West, and then they just brought it back to the office with them. And the techs are, one, they're confused. They were like, I didn't know what this box was. I kind of had it sitting in this room for a little bit. Or they're kind of just like, I don't know, like we like our whatever they were using before. So it's definitely there's definitely two different attitudes I get on the call. It's super apparent.
Yep, that's super interesting. Looks like we have maybe time for one more question here. What type of development opportunities do you think would be most helpful for our techs, ones they would actually want to attend?
Also a really good question. I would say any type of, it's really hard because sometimes in healthcare, some of the conferences are like super technical, or like, the context of the conferences are like super medical sometimes. But if there are any type of local events that just talk about, like office efficiency or new technologies that are coming out, those are always really good conferences or just talks to have your staff attend. It just keeps them educated, and it helps them it helps them help you make decisions for the office. I would also say any type of like walks, or like Long Island is big on like cancer walks, diabetic walks, and getting your staff out there to meet other staff members from other practices. You're just going to build a network of knowledge, and it just makes your staff feel part of a community.
Oh, I like that idea. Charity walks. Also, you had just mentioned Vision Expo West. I would just add on to that is coming up, so that could be a great opportunity to bring your techs and explore the technologies and innovations that are available to the profession.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, that's all the time we have for questions. Again, thank you so much for attending, everybody. We appreciate you, and we will see you soon.